private capital for development of its resources and for Western expansion. From overseas, and this is the point I wish to emphasize, at first cautiously and often with misunderstanding on both sides, the venture capital of Europe was invested in the new United States of America. The great benefits accruing to the people of the United States from its material development were attributable in an important degree to this assistance received from abroad, which, together with the economic and political freedom of action, enabled our people to capitalize rapidly upon the great natural resources of the country and thus develop the production which has enabled us to bear today the heaviest responsibilities ever placed upon a single nation. By 1900, the people of the United States themselves were becoming large investors in enterprises abroad. But internal development continued unabated. Despite the transformation from debtor to creditor nation and the accumulation of capital for foreign investments of its own, the United States continues to welcome money and technical assistance from other countries. The point I wish to make is that even after the United States had achieved economic maturity and had become a major source of venture capital, foreign investors continued to participate in the industrial and commercial growth of that nation without discrimination. This policy has enabled the United States to prosper. The large-scale exchange of capital, goods and services, the system of free enterprise, the confidence of other people in our future, and the protection afforded foreign investments, the contributions made by skilled, energetic immigrants, all these help immeasurably in making our nation not only productive and vigorous, but free. I repeat, this policy has enabled the United States to prosper, and I wish here to stress that it has enabled the United States to do a great deal for other countries, including the protection of their freedoms, along with our own. May I at this time invite your attention to a fact of particular significance related to the broad benefits to which I have just referred. That is, the fact that these benefits have been transferred into human values through the elevation of the real wages of labor to a point higher than has been achieved under any other system of enterprise in the history of mankind. These benefits automatically transfer themselves into the cultural and physical advancement of all the people. The United States is qualified, I submit, by its own historical experience to respond understandingly to the purpose of other American republics to improve their economic status. We understand the wish to achieve balanced economies through the development of industries, mechanization of agriculture, and modernization of transportation. My government is prepared to increase the scale of assistance it has been giving to the economic development of the American republics. But it is beyond the capacity of the United States government itself to finance more than a small portion of the vast development needed. The capital required through the years must come from private sources, both domestic and foreign. As the experience of the United States has shown, progress can be achieved best through individual effort and the use of private resources. Encouragement should therefore be given to the increase of investment capital from internal as well as external sources. It is obvious that foreign capital will naturally gravitate most readily to countries where it is accorded fair and equitable treatment. For its part, the United States fully supports the promotion of economic development in the American republics. We advocate the prompt preparation of sound development programs which will set specific and realistic goals to be accomplished in the next few years. The United States supports the International Bank for Construction and Development as an important source of long-term capital for developing the economies of the American Republic. My government confidently expects the role of this institution to be one of increasing usefulness. The President of the United States is submitting to Congress a request for an increase in the lending authority of the Export-Import Bank which will be available for sound projects in the American republics. These government funds will be in addition to the private financing which will be needed for a much greater number of development projects. The United States has studied the proposals regarding the taxation of foreign investments with a view to avoiding double taxation and to encouraging the flow of private capital into other countries desiring it. I am glad to report that the President has under consideration measures to liberalize taxes on capital invested in foreign countries. These measures are designed to encourage not only initial investment, but also the retention and reinvestment abroad of earnings derived from such capital. These measures also would liberalize the tax treatment of the United States citizens residing abroad and should therefore encourage technical experts to accept employment in other countries. My government attaches special importance to efforts to improve health, sanitation, education, and agricultural and industrial processes throughout the hemisphere. We look forward to an expansion of the cooperative efforts of the American republics in these fields. We are surveying the availability of technical experts who may collaborate in the progress and development of the American republics as recently authorized by the Congress on a more flexible basis. The economic advancement and security of this hemisphere are supremely important to all countries, large and small, and to every citizen of our countries. Through joint endeavor, with each country accepting its share of responsibility and seeking faithfully to carry out its obligations, I am confident that the American republics will consistently move forward and attain the objectives which we all so earnestly desire. Before concluding, I wish to call attention to the close relationship between the solemn pacts we are here to conclude at Bogota and the Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance signed at Rio de Janeiro last September. Together, these pacts, when ratified, will form a harmonious whole, guaranteeing the social, cultural, and economic progress of the Americas, and at the same time, the preservation of their independence, security, and sovereignty. I am informed that 10 countries have already ratified the Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance, and that several other nations plan to take positive action along this line. It is to be hoped that during our labors here we may receive the gratifying word that the required number of ratifications have been deposited to enable the treaty to enter into effect. Such action is particularly important in the present world situation. We need the other vital measures we are to consider here as indispensable contributions to the welfare of the Americans. The peoples for whom we speak are impatient to launch this promising cooperative endeavor, for they see in it their greatest hope for achieving a better life for themselves, their children, and their children's children. They look to this conference to set in motion the concerted effort that will make their constant dreams of peace and plenty a living, satisfying reality. We must not fail them. As has been the case with my predecessors here, it has been necessary for me to speak to you formally from a prepared statement. Much of what is said here goes far beyond this chamber, to ears other than ours. Now, my friends, I wish to speak to you personally and directly. I feel that in the discussions, particularly of economic matters, so much of detail necessarily becomes involved that the great purpose for which we are assembled and the situation in which we find ourselves becomes somewhat submerged, if not at least partially lost sight of. I feel that in what has already been said, and I suppose in much of what is yet to be said, that the reference is direct or indirect, but specifically, in many instances, to my country, to its international actions and present undertakings. I also have the feeling and understanding of the tremendous responsibilities and the equally tremendous burdens that the government of the United States has been compelled to assume, and which is very pertinent to our discussions here in this conference. For example, at the present moment, our legislature is under the necessity of considering, at the request of the President, the strengthening of our armed forces, which will involve the expenditure of additional billions. Now, you have a direct interest in that, because we hope that through such a process we can terminate this subverting of democratic governments in Western Europe, and that we can reach an understanding to maintain the peace, which means the security, the tranquility, and the future trade developments of the entire Western Hemisphere, and not alone the United States. But the great burden of such action has rested on the people of the United States, and it is a very heavy burden. I think that I can, to a reasonable degree, understand your reactions and your views, because I had a considerable experience along very similar lines immediately preceding and during the war years. As Chief of Staff of the United States Army, from the fall of 1939 up until almost the end of the war, I was under continual and the heaviest possible pressure from almost every part of the world, from the rulers of countries, from our own military commanders in those regions, and from groups or sections at home or their representatives in Congress who felt very deeply regarding a particular situation. Now, if we had not resisted those multitudes of pressures, all of which were based on the logical belief, to a reasonable extent, of the people concerned, of the importance and the necessity, the urgency of their situation, the duration of the war and the situation at the end of the war would probably have been quite a different thing. Now, the United States today, with this tremendous responsibility which involves us all over the world, has to proceed with great wisdom in what it does and what it feels it can further afford to do. I ask you to have that in mind, to realize what a tremendous burden the people of my country have undertaken, and you profit by it practically as much as we do, and in security and in democracy just as much as we do. I was sitting here yesterday, and in regarding this very decorative and impressive mural painting which illuminates this room, it suddenly occurred to me that it had a peculiar significance in relation to an event far distant from us here, in the far Pacific, as a matter of fact. The last territory that we wrested from the hands of the Japanese was a small island called Okinawa,